Hi guys, today I'm going to do what I hope will be a relatively short video on getting the most from Visual Studio Code, focusing on things like settings, extensions, and keyboard shortcuts. The main point of this video is that a professional knows how to use their tools, right? You can quickly tell a difference between a pro chef and a novice just by the way they hold their knife and the way that they hold their food that they're trying to cut. One way is going to be fast, quick, and safe. Another way is a recipe for having blood in your food. Personally, I prefer the former way. So, as a professional, you want to learn to use Visual Studio Code like a pro. There are three primary things that you need to get comfortable with. Those are settings, extensions, which are third-party plugins that can be used to extend the functionality that comes with Visual Studio Code and are usually tailored to different programming languages or programming environments, and keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are arguably the most important, and I'll be highlighting those a lot as I go through the other two things. A lot of times the settings and extensions are specifically to get you to keyboard shortcuts. Alright, so let's get started. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut to move to a different desktop on my computer. You also may notice in my videos that all of a sudden a search box, a spotlight search box, will pop up in the middle of my screen without me having clicked anything. That's a keyboard shortcut. In general on a Mac, that is the Command key plus space. I use Command space for a different keyboard shortcut, so in my case it's slightly different. But if you bring up the Spotlight search, you can type the name of almost any program, hit enter, and it will launch it, right? So I could launch Visual Studio Code, I can launch Terminal, I can launch iTerm, and it learns your commonly typed command. So in this case, I just typed I, and it knew that I wanted iTerm instead of iMovie or Illustrator or some other piece of software that starts with I. So let's open Visual Studio Code, type code, hit enter, and you'll see here I've got a regular screen popped up. To open up the panel on the left hand side, I can do Command, or I think in Windows it's Control B, will open and close that on the left hand side. Control plus the backtick, which is next to the 1 key, will open and close the terminal. And so it's important to start exploring extensions, right? So I'm going to hit Command B to open up the Explorer window here on the left, and you see a number of icons here on the left hand side. There's one down here that looks like a bunch of boxes. That is extensions, and you can see that the tooltip that pops up has a Shift Command X as the keyboard shortcut for that. So let's say I've got things closed. I can hit Shift Command X and it'll pop up the extensions window. All right, hit Shift Command X again and it'll shift back and forth between the window and here. If I want to just open the File Explorer, Shift Command E, right, will get me there. Shift Command X gets me back there. Shift Command E, I hit it again, it moves me over to my coding area on the right. All right, so let's go back to the extensions window. And so if you're watching my videos, a lot of times you'll see that things seem to happen without me using my mouse to make them happen. Using keyboard shortcuts will make you exponentially faster as a coder. Over time, they become like muscle memory, and you won't remember what it was like to live without them. A fun challenge you can do is, once you've practiced for a while, see how long you can go before you have to actually touch your mouse to do something. I think you'll find that you're going to be a lot faster if you practice these things. So what do you do when you don't know the keyboard shortcut? Let's say, for example, that I want to take this window and maximize it to be full screen. I know how to do that with my mouse. I just click the little green bubble in the upper right here and choose the Enter Full Screen menu option right here. Now, before when I moused over something, I was able to get a keyboard shortcut that popped up in the tooltip. Didn't happen this time. So in this case, I'm going to go to the View menu, go to Appearance, and I can see here that there is a full screen option, and over here on the right, it actually has the tooltip. Now you'll notice that not every choice here has a tooltip, but frequently if you go into the settings, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you'll be able to customize things so that you can actually get a tooltip. I've also got something called Zen mode, but you need to know what these little symbols stand for. On OS X, the little caret symbol is the control key. The little four-leaf clover here, that is the command key. In general, if you see the command key for OS X, that is analogous to the control key on Windows, but not always. The keyboards don't exactly line up, so you're going to have to look up the specific commands for your operating system. All right, so if I hold, so I'm going to click back in here. I'm going to hold down Control Command and hit F, and now I get full screen. If I hit that again, toggles it down. So you can see I can move back and forth relatively easily and quickly with these keyboard shortcuts. Now over here on the left hand side, you can see these are extensions, right? So extensions are additional plugins or pieces of software that the community has built. Sometimes these are maintained by Microsoft and the Visual Studio Code team, but more often than not, these extensions come from the community. They come from individual programmers or sometimes companies, and they're made available, usually free and open source, to anybody who wants to use them. And based on what kind of coding you do, you'll see a recommended section down here at the bottom, which will recommend some extensions. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but first I want to look at the ones that I have installed here and make some recommendations to you about which ones I think you should install. All right, so the first one here is called Advanced New File. This one is one that I recommend for everyone, and this allows you to create a new file with a keyboard shortcut without having to touch your mouse. Now, you can already do that, right? Control N or Command N will create a new file, right? By the way, Command or Control W will close a file if that's open. That works across almost every program. But let's go back and look at my Explorer window, right? I don't have any folders open. Let's open a folder. Let's say I'm in a project, right? And I want to add a new file, and I want to put it in the tests directory, right? What I'd normally have to do is hit Command N to create a new file, and then Command S will save it. But since it's never been saved before, it'll ask me for, I'll get a drop down where I can click New Folder, I'm going to call it the Tests folder, and my .spec.js. I'm going to create a new spec file. Hit Escape to get out of that. What if I don't want to have to use my mouse to do that? That's where the Advanced New File extension comes in, right? I'm going to go back, switch back to the Explorer, and if you hold down on a Mac, it's Option Command N. This says, first of all, tell me what folder you want to put it in. Well, the folder I want to put it in doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to type a / and I'm going to type tests, right? And this will say put it in the test folder, and now I can type the file name my.spec.js, and all of a sudden it will have created that file with the correct file name in the correct place, all by keyboard shortcut. So that is an extension which I recommend everybody get, Advanced New File. Some of these that I have are ones that you probably won't need. For example, the Apache Configuration Syntax Highlighter, you probably don't need that. Docker, you probably don't need that. .env is one for getting syntax for a special kind of environment file. You probably don't need that. ESLint, though, if you are a JavaScript developer, absolutely have that. If you are doing Jest as your testing framework, Jest snippets is another great one to have. LiveShare and LiveShare Audio, I recommend these for everyone. As we get deeper into the semester and we want to share coding experiences with each other, LiveShare allows us to basically have like a Google Docs experience, but right in Visual Studio Code, where we can share each other's screens with us. Another one I recommend for everyone is Markdown Lint. Now, as I'm talking about this, you may be wondering, well, how do I find out more about them? If you click on it, you will get basically the home page for this extension, and they have introduction. They talk about different ways that they can be installed, how to use them, and different, in this case, the different ways to configure and set it up. If it is installed and you want to get rid of it, you can click the uninstall. You can also disable them either globally for the whole program, or you can disable them just for this particular workspace. This is useful when, for example, maybe you're switching frequently between Python and JavaScript, and you want to disable your Python extensions while you're doing JavaScript coding, and vice versa. So you can disable them on a per project basis. That's the workspace option they're talking about there. But in general, right, if you click on the name of a particular extension, you'll get information. Now, one of the things that's really good to see is the number of downloads. This particular extension has been downloaded over 2 million times and it's gotten 5-star ratings. If you look down in the recommended section, right, it has a bunch of recommendations for different things. And then you can also search for something, right? So maybe I want to look for Python related extensions, and I get a bunch of things that come up. Like there's the recommended Python one. This one is actually maintained by Microsoft and has almost 25 million downloads. But then, if we scroll down a ways, here's something called Python Editing Terminal. I don't know what it does exactly. I just chose it at random. But you can see only 32,000 people have downloaded this, right? And the number of people who've downloaded it is an indication of how useful it is, how well coded it is. Sometimes, and these are community contributed, so some of them are actually not super well coded, and you have to be careful about the ways that you adopt them, right? So I'm going to click this button up here to clear the search box and go back to the ones that I have installed. Markdown Lint gives you syntax highlighting for Markdown. Markdown is the syntax you use in your readme.md files, or for your personal website if you're using GitHub pages like we did earlier this semester. Markdown is essentially an easy way to get HTML formatting without actually typing HTML. Here's a couple more for people who are doing JavaScript development: the npm and npm IntelliSense extensions. The Python extension, this is the big one that Microsoft maintains, and everybody who's doing Python development should have it. Sass is a language I use frequently for doing formatting and web pages. StyleLint is also for CSS. These are some that I use for some of the web projects that I'm involved with. I only recommend you get these if you are involved in projects. Here's a fun one called To-Do Tree, and you can see it adds actually an additional item to the right hand side here. And what this does is if you've got, let's go to my files and open up my spec, and let's say I'm gonna have a function do something, and I want to, you can see if you mouse over it says do something is defined but never used, right? So I already have some extensions installed that make me check my syntax. Let's say I wrote this, I created the stub for this function, but I haven't written it yet. I can add a comment at the top, and I can put to do write this implementation. And then what will happen is this to-do tree will go through my code, and then it'll show me different files in my project that have to-do in there, and we'll also do some other highlighting, things like that. So that's an example of another one that I kind of recommend for people. It's a nice to have. VTur is for something else that I do, and then Visual Studio IntelliCode, this is another one I recommend that everybody get. I also recommend that you explore, search for different extensions and try to figure out if they'll be useful for you. Remember, you can always uninstall them later, but sometimes the functionality you get is absolutely indispensable. Alright, so we've talked about extensions, we've talked a lot about keyboard shortcuts, but the real thing that drives all of these keyboard shortcuts and extensions are settings. You can get to settings by, of course, going to the menus at the top and clicking preferences, and see, this is on a Mac, obviously, going to settings, but you can also get them to the keyboard shortcut which on OS X is Command comma. All right, so if I'm here and I do Command comma, it will open up the settings. There are two different types of settings. There are user settings, and these user settings apply to every project that you work on. And then there are workspace settings. I'm going to close the File Explorer on the left. There are user settings which apply to you globally. There are workspace settings which apply just to the project that you're currently working on. You can search for settings here by typing them. So for example, let's say I wanted settings related to ESLint. I can type ESLint and it will search through and show me all of the different settings, and I can click on them and do research about them. I can edit them, and this is one way to do it. All of this interface that we have here is a graphical user interface, and there is another way to look at your settings, which is in the raw JSON format, and you can get to that by doing Shift Command P, settings, and you see here preferences, open settings UI or open settings JSON. Open settings JSON shows you another view of all of these settings that you have here, just in one text file where you can update them, right? And these are, once you get more experience with this, then this actually might be a faster way to update your settings. But either way works just as well. And you'll notice some things like I have my font family for my environment set to something called Monofur, right? There's a whole bunch of different font families that you can get for VSCode. This is the one that I chose, right? You can set your color theme, right? And a lot of these you can set by doing Shift Control or Shift Command P. If I type theme, right? Preferences, color theme, and I hit that, then there's a whole bunch of them here. I can scroll through them to change the one, right? Monokai tends to be the one that I like the most. But remember that Shift, Control, or Command P will open up a little box at the top. Let's say I want to install some extension, right? I can type the word install, which will filter the list of available commands, and then I can use my up and down arrow keys to scroll through them, hit enter on the one that I want. If I decide I don't want to do that, I can close that. Another keyboard shortcut that's really useful is just Command P or Control P will search for files in your project. So let's say I close that myspec.js file. I want to reopen it, right? I can hit Command P, and since it was the last one I closed, it started out as highlight. I could just hit enter. Oops, actually it didn't do that. Command P, if I type my, then it filters down to that, and then if I click enter, it'll open it. Command or Control W will close that. Command or Control W will close your settings. Hopefully you understand that there are tons of amazing things that you can do with keyboard shortcuts. For example, one of the things I like a lot is the command to let you move your lines up and down. On OS X, it is the Alt or Option key and arrow. So if I hit Alt or Option, I can move a line up and down. Say you had some sort of bullet point list, right? And you decided after you had done them that you wanted to move this point up. I could just hit Option or Alt and the arrow key and move it up and down. If you hold down Shift while you're holding the Option key, you can make an exact copy of the line below it. So I could do that, right? You can see how I can do those things. There are all kinds of things, like, for example, if I want to select this word, Command D will select the word. If I hit Command D again, it'll select the next instance of the word. If I do that, I'll notice that, oh my gosh, I typed one of those incorrectly, hit Escape. Let's go here and change this to bullet. Now I can do Command D, 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 and it'll select all 5 of them. I can change that word in all those different places at once. Another way I can do this is if I do Command D to select it, and then I do Shift Command, I think it's L, right? And that will just select all instances of a word, and you can change it back to bullet if that's what you wanted. Just to wrap this up, you really need to practice. There's really no other way to get good at this than just to practice, practice, practice. Read blogs. There are tons of blog posts which will say something like 10 most super secret extensions for VS Code, or 10 best keyboard shortcuts. There's always new blog posts like that coming out on Medium and other places. There are bunches of videos which demonstrate how to do these things. There are tutorials, and the main thing is just to be curious. If you're watching a tutorial where somebody does something and there was a keyboard shortcut that they used and you don't know what it is, pause the video and go Google it and see if you can figure out what it is. It'll make you so much faster, and it'll be a lot more fun. It'll make you feel like a badass. And when you are applying for jobs and people are watching you code, which sometimes they will, you'll definitely impress people. All right, I'm going to close it off there. Hope this was useful.